Welcome, everyone. It's the Crypto Lark. Very excited to have back on the show Naomi Brockwell. How's it going?
Pretty good. How's everything going with you?
Doing very well. Now, today we're going to be covering a whole wide range of topics about cryptocurrencies and government tyranny and all that fun kind of stuff. But let me ask you this question to start off with. What, I guess, story or thing happening in crypto land has really been getting your attention recently?
Oh gosh, I mean, I guess it's slightly outside of crypto land, but it's very much linked. I've been following closely what's been going on in Hong Kong at the moment, and people kind of fighting back against like authoritarian regimes. They're cutting
Mm-hmm.
down the smart towers, like the facial recognition towers and things. You've got people that are moving increasingly towards cash and sort of bypassing the ID cards that they use to commute and sort of the tools that the government's using to track their location, et cetera. And people are giving out cash, in the subway stations and one-use Metro cards so that people's movements can't be tracked. So that's interesting. And that's really ripe ground for cryptocurrency use. And China has always been sort of at the forefront of crypto. And this sort of what's going on there kind of makes you realize why. And there's sort of that trend across the world at the moment with things happening that just make me go, wow, like, is anyone paying attention to this? This is kind of scary stuff with the cash bans going on. I know
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about that before. In governments clamping down on privacy, all kinds of things that just, it's making me scared, but also making me really happy that we now have digital currency that can't be shut down. And we have great privacy tools, et cetera. So stories like that are really capturing my attention right now.
And for good reason. I mean, this is the future of our society that people are fighting for, and it's. I always find it just absolutely crazy. Here we are. We have these governments that we put in charge of running us, and they are
Making
almost.
my decisions
That's
for
right,
me.
making my decisions for me. Because we're not adult enough to try and take some
Apparently not.
technological leaps here and actually start governing ourselves. But we continue to see this trend in human society where it's us versus them. And why do they still have power? Why do we continue to enable them? It's a crazy thing. And this whole Hong Kong thing, I'm so excited for the people of Hong Kong because it's a beautiful place. I've visited there so many times. It's an amazing city, and to see them really fighting back in a peaceful way. I've seen people like, oh, if only they had guns. Like, no, the Chinese government would come to murder everybody if they had guns. Like, this is a peaceful revolution. This is how revolutions happen. This is powerful, and it's weirdly dystopian in the way that it's going on. Everyone's wearing face masks and they've got their umbrellas and they're hiding their identities and they're doing all these things because the technological war, it's hardcore. Like, they're doing it in a way that I don't think any other revolution is this tech savvy that I've seen anywhere.
Or this coordinated. I mean, I've watched some of those videos where they have these giant human supply chains set up where they're just passing resources from one person to the next,
Mm-hmm.
or where they've got all these coordinated methods for shutting down tear gas, where tear gas gets thrown and then they immediately shut down, pour water on it, put like cones over it to stop it spreading. It's like really organized the way that they're fighting this. And then you have like interesting things. Like, I know that I've been looking at like Chinese news as well, and the way they reporting it is very much like this violent protest, this is disrupting peace, etc. This is going to put into jeopardy the Beijing plan that we have, where Hong Kong is meant to be part of this extended kind of free zone, and maybe it won't anymore. Kind of that sort of propaganda. But the reality is that when you have people like they're taking food from vending machines, and then you have a pile, like a basket of money next to it, where they're leaving the money from the vending machines. So little things like that, and where they're just leaving out cash in the subway stations, as I said, for anyone to take because they're looking out for each other. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this. And it's, what you're talking about when you talk about this technological fight they're going through right now. Like the tech in China, it is incredibly advanced and Orwellian, and it's going on all over the world. It's not just China.
Mm-hmm.
All this facial recognition stuff. We're like, oh my god, that's terrible. Like smart towers, that's scary. It's like, you don't think that there's that sort of technology going on in the United States. So, for example, you've got CCTV everywhere in the UK. I mean, this stuff is going on everywhere, but Hong Kong is really fighting back at the moment. And I mean, exciting is one word for it, because I mean, Hong Kong has just been this miracle place, right? It's been this bastion of kind of the market blooming and innovation and prosperity, and its transformation has been incredible. And so that, like, it is exciting to see them fighting back, but my heart also goes out for these people. Like, their lives have been completely uprooted. They did not ask for this fight. This was something that was thrown onto them with, you know, political forces. You know, I like to talk about how, you know, these governments, they play these games with each other, and then at the end of the day, it's the people in the countries that bear the brunt of this. They're the ones who suffer and have to deal with the consequences of at the end of the day, egos fighting with each other.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we've got at the moment. And the people of Hong Kong who didn't choose this life and whose tourism is now going down the drain because no one wants to go through Hong Kong. I don't want to go through Hong Kong when I go to Australia. And my heart goes out to them. But at the end of the day, I'm just really hoping for their success in fighting tyranny.
Yeah, and it's a real David versus Goliath battle. I mean, little Hong Kong versus the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, they're a megalith of just power and domination, and you know, I think some of the most terrifying stuff. But I think you made a good point. People think, oh, it's only China who's doing all this really whacked out crazy stuff, like their social credit program where you can't buy a plane ticket if you bought a bottle of vodka last week or whatever it might be, right? That's like super Orwellian. But all the world's biggest tech companies are working hand in hand with China. Google helped create the Great Chinese Firewall, right? These guys are all working together, and this creeping authoritarianism, it's this slow boil. It's, you know, it's the frog in the pot kind of thing. And we see it happening everywhere, and it's increasing everywhere. And we see, for example, I keep looking across the water towards Australia and thinking, what's going on over there? And it's happening in New Zealand too, to a lesser extent at the moment, but I see all these things happening in Australia, like when they had the last year they had this access bill that forces developers to create backdoors the government can get into, and if the developer says anything that they were forced to create a backdoor, they go to prison or they get fined or any of this stuff. So like that's really crazy. And now, of course, we have the $10,000 cash limit in Australia. Can you talk on that a little bit?
Yeah, and before I go on to that, I want to just continue on what you just mentioned about these backdoors. So I've been in touch with a bunch of different companies here because I know that there are these double binds going on at the moment, where not only can they not talk about the fact that the government's forcing them to put backdoors into things, they're not even allowed to criticize the policy in general, to say, oh, this is a thing that we don't like. So I'm actually building at the moment a secure drop facility for people to reach out to me. That'll probably be done in about a week. So that, like, if this is going on at companies, I want a safe way for them to be reaching out to journalists to let them know, so that consumers could be knowing, you know, is their hardware wallet compromised? Is there, you know, things like that we don't know, because there's so much stuff going on at the moment, and I'm hearing all these little whispers from people who can't really talk about this stuff, and they're clearly worried about, you know, their safety and not going to prison. And so it's not just in Australia that's happening, it's in America as well, and it is scary at the moment. I would just, if you're out there and you're thinking you're using a secure device or the secure platform, just second guess that, because no, just presume nothing in your possession is secure right now, unless you vetted it yourself or you work for the company and you're in charge of it. You know, just be really careful out there.
I think one quick point before we get on to the 10K thing is the Snowden revelations. What was that, 6 or 7 years ago now? Something like that. Does anyone think that it's got better since then? No, it's nobody really cares. I mean, I said the tech's improved. The government's got better at being able to spy on us, got better at being able to know every single movement at all times of the day. It's crazy.
It's terrifying. And you know what is scary is so many of these things happen in the media where whistleblowers get thrown in jail, or people who, you know, like this huge revelation, this Snowden revelation. And how often does the media cover Snowden these days? Because he's constantly fighting this fight. He hasn't just disappeared. He is on there talking about this stuff, letting people know about further developments, etc. The media doesn't report on this. What happened to Assange? The media isn't talking about that.
No, the media is bought and paid for. The corporations took over a long time ago. They're not our friends. They're not the arbiters of truth. They're the arbiters of propaganda.
Oh, and it's a little terrifying. So I'm glad that you're talking about this, Crypto Lark. There are very few people who are, but it is a scary state of affairs. And so they're going on to Australia with the 10K cash ban. That's terrifying as well, because not just terrifying because it enables people to track you. And that's immediately what my mind goes to. I think I don't want all my purchases tracked. You know, this is a terrible system where they're forcing us to put everything electronically, where they can monitor our usage and our purchases and our choices. But then there's something also sinister going on that no one really talks about, which is the state of the economy right now, negative interest rates, and forcing you to use a system that you may not want to use. You may not like the banks. You may not like what they stand for. You may not like their policies with them, you know, with different policies going on right now where they're literally charging customers for services they have no intention of providing. They're charging customers for services when the customers have been deceased for 10 years. There are all these scandals that happen. And you might say, oh, I'm going to vote with my dollar and I'm going to not use those services. And then the government comes along and says, we're going to force you to use those services.
That's right. That's
so it's like getting
up.
Yeah, getting away the choice is the first bad thing, but that choice becomes really important to our own well-being when we start talking about negative interest rates. Because if you're forced to hold your money in banks, in cash, and you're like basically going to be paying for the privilege of storing your money in a bank, and they're forcing you to store it in the bank, I mean, it's such a racket. I can't believe that like there isn't more uproar about this. And I know that in Australia, since this happened, like immediately, so a few things happened. They said, okay, well, this is open for comment time for like a month or something ridiculous. Please submit your comments and we will ignore them entirely, and then move along and implement this as planned because we don't care what you think. So
I like your impression of, you know, the
and why am I talking with like a very strange British, quasi-British accent there? So I just want to sound elitist, like, you know, we're in control of you. You don't get to make choices about your own money. So we had
Nigel, the peasants are acting up again.
The peasants, shut them down. So the comment section, like people did submit comments. I don't think anything's going to happen about that. But then people have started signing petitions saying, you know, we do not want this cash ban. So that's good. But it's had like 7,000 signatures. So in a country of how many people are there in Australia? Like almost 25 million, somewhere around there. And so 7,000 people are upset about the cash ban. That blows my mind. And then on top of that, you've got, so immediately the crypto sphere, because in the original bill, the draft bill that they put forward, it said that crypto is basically exempt. They said that we do not believe that crypto is used in the nefarious purchases and uses that we're trying to stop. There's no evidence to suggest that it's used, you know, to a large degree with money laundering, etc. So it said, you know, that crypto at this stage is not involved in this. And that's since been changed because crypto erupted. Well, they're like, oh, crypto is exempt and you can go and use crypto instead and la, 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 la. And that's changed now. And they actually said, what's the exact wording? Let me pull that up because it's basically, I'll paraphrase. They basically say, cash or any digital equivalent thereof. So they've since changed that. So there's no way to move money around in Australia without going through not only this heavily monitored system, this system where your funds can be seized at any time and tracked or frozen. But it's just, I mean, the whole thing, it just makes me so
wild.
upset.
You know, and the thing is, Australia was kind of late to the party in this. Europe's already done this for much lower levels. I think in Spain, it's like, I don't know, 2,000 euros. And in France, it's like 3,000 euros. And it's super broken.
Yeah, it's super broken. And all I can do is be thankful that we have alternatives. So, I mean, no one's talking about the paradigm shift that has occurred where we've actually changed power and to kind of turn the tables there. I mean, you see in Hong Kong, like people actually rising up, and it's a kind of an unheard of story, like an entire country that is kind of peacefully rising up and saying, no, we're just going to cut down the surveillance towers. Enough is enough. We're not going to submit to this. And that just, it makes me so happy and so sad at the same time. Sad that they have to deal with this and happy that they're actually fighting back. But I am so glad that we do have tools that enable us to fight back. And this fight isn't going to go away. We're not just going to wake up one day and be like, yes, we won the fight. Now we will live in a utopian paradise forever where we have freedom. That's not the way it works. This is a constant battle. And it's up to every individual to be using the tools tools out there that, you know, awesome people are creating for you to protect your own privacy, you know, using a VPN, using a browser like DuckDuckGo instead of Chrome, instead of Google, using Brave browser instead of Chrome.
Yep.
And so
use the Brave browser, guys. It's amazing.
Yeah, all of these tools do help you, and none of them are foolproof, none of them are bulletproof. So just use as many of them as you can, you know, just on top of each other. Privacy screens on your phone, because they're literally cameras everywhere around you, you know, on your computers as well. Just make sure that you're taking advantage of the tools around you that are giving you more freedom and more privacy in your life, because the battle isn't going to go away. It's going to get worse, and you need to be keeping up with all the latest tech that is fighting all the latest tech that, you know, authoritarian regimes are using against you.
Exactly. It's a crazy situation, because you've got this technology, you've got the ability to know what's going on through the internet, right? And most people, unfortunately, are not caring enough. And that's why Hong Kong's so amazing. It's not just like a fringe of people like you see with a lot of anti-government protests that are all over the world. All over the world, they're happening everywhere. The media never reports on most of them unless it's politically convenient for them. But in Hong Kong, it's not just like 1% of the population. It's like 20, 30% of the population some days getting out there protesting against the government. That's massive. That's massive. And to say 20, 30% of the population of Hong Kong are willing to put their butts on the line, knowing how authoritarian Beijing is, knowing how strong this response has been. You got a lot of people who are. That's right. That's right.
Therefore, uprising against the Chinese government is not good, guys.
No, and it's very, very brave of these people, and that's why, like, you know, when people ask me, like, "Oh, why cryptocurrency?" Like, if you're just here to make money, chances are you're not going to be able to ride out the storm and all this stuff. For me, it's always been a bigger picture, right? It's about taking back the power of Bitcoin, you know, monetary responsibility, right? Or you start talking about privacy coins. That's amazing technology. Like Monero is amazing technology for private transactions in a way that Bitcoin isn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we also take that with a grain of salt, though. Again, these things are not bulletproof, and you actually have entire government departments that are putting tremendous amount of resources. Like the Department of Treasury has set up an entire division to try and track Monero purchases, to try and figure out if they can crack that system, you know. Obviously, Monero is developing their tech at all times, so they're going to continue to become more private. Same with Zcash and other privacy-centered coins out there. But just be aware that don't think that your purchases are shielded. Just be really careful out there, because a lot of stuff going on. And it, like, this transition to this Orwellian society, kind of want to talk a little bit about that for a second, because when I think of like Orwell, you know, you read his stories, and now it's become this phrase we use to refer to a society that is surveilled and monitored and tracked, and you know, the freedom is significantly inhibited. And we read these stories and we think, how did the society come to this? You know, surely along the way people rose up, and why would they let the government just dictate to them? You know, all of these different things go through our mind, like, how did we get there? And I don't think that you get there from the way everyone presumes. I don't think it's like some government coup that happens, or some bad person who gets into the White House or anything like that. Look at what you're doing in your day-to-day lives. Like right now, you have the government that is, obviously they want to monitor citizens, and it's always under the guise of, well, we're protecting you, we're helping you, etc. But they're leveraging all of the voluntary choices we make in our lives. So when we voluntarily give away our data, when we like things on Facebook, when we talk to people through social messaging apps that aren't encrypted, even ones that are encrypted sometimes, and there are backdoors in there. So, like, you know, just be aware of your choices, because the government, literally, they don't need to have an entire system that monitors your likes and tracks those down, because Facebook just provides it to them on this silver platter and says, here you go, here's all the data. Oh, here are the location services. This person keeps the location data on at all time. You could see exactly where they are in the world. You know, oh, this person's microphone is on their phone, and we can tap into that at any time. So, like, they're leveraging this technology that we're opting to put into our lives. And you need to be really aware of that, because it's not going to be some coup that one day this bad government gets in and all these these things happen. This is happening right now. We are in a surveilled state, but you know, I like private companies. I like this tech. You know, I'm not saying that this is bad and corporations are bad. That's not my argument here at all. The argument is just be aware, self-conscious, and aware of the choices you're making in your lives, and just presume that any data you give is being collected and is being harvested, and any wrong decision you may make in your future life, all of this stuff, this is like a treasure trove for people. So just be aware of what you're putting out there, because I think that we as a society need to shift our thinking and realize that this Orwellian society isn't going to, you know, appear. It's this slow process that we've been enabling, and maybe we need to be smarter about our choices.
Absolutely true. And every choice you make is a choice for or against that kind of society. I mean, the classic saying, right, is war is peace, and freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength, right? Well, we continue to enable those kind of decisions, right? When we're ignorant about our data and what our tax dollars are going for and all these things, well, then, yeah, it's strength for them, ignorance for us, right? When we continue to participate in the tools of you know, slavery to the banks and all these things, you're not free in that situation. If you have this horrible debt to the bank, you're not free. They own you, right? And all this stuff kind of goes on. And that actually brings me to perhaps what might be our last conversation topic point here for the day is central bank cryptocurrencies. If we want to talk about, you know, slavery, that feels like a big topic here for us, because we see what's going on now where we have Facebook wanting to bring out Libra, which is basically a corporate play at, you know, financial domination. And then of course we have the Bank of England governor coming out recently saying that they're looking at a digital basket of currencies, which might be some cryptographically based thing, but that's not a new idea. We have the Chinese government, which is looking to bring out their crypto digital, whatever you want to call it, not really a cryptocurrency, but using cryptography, potentially on a ledger where they get to see everything. You don't get to see everything, you know, typical kind of government stuff.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on these corporate and central bank digital assets, can we call them? I don't really want to call them cryptocurrencies, but they are going to be very similar to cryptocurrencies in a lot of ways that they function.
I mean, they're going to be the same as the system that we use currently. There's going to be no shift there, only more of our lives will become digitized, and it'll be easy for them to track, because if we're using cryptocurrency or using, we shouldn't use that word, we're using this digital currency, then we're presumably not using cash, and cash is going to get phased out, and we're going to have less options there. I mean, I am excited about Libra, because Libra is shaking up the paradigm of what money is, of people's understanding of money. Money is always, like, well, for a long time, like, in history, money was created privately, and it was not created by governments. Governments came into play later, and then they co-opted the system. And since then, we've had them inextricably linked in our minds, you know, to the creation of money. Oh, money, that's created by government. Oh, that's a function of government. That's only government. And, you know, anything private, you know, we sort of dismiss. And Libra is sort of turning the tide with that. And Bitcoin already did, you know, turn the tables there. Bitcoin came out, and suddenly, like, a private individual could issue a currency, and the market could decide that it has value, and people start using it of their own volition. That's beautiful. I love that. Libra, I think, is going to popularize that concept of government not being the sole provider of currencies. And I think that's really interesting. I'm probably not going to use Libra, but I do like that they're kind of shaking up this idea that, you know, government is the only one that can create currency, because the next step there, you know, you have companies that create their own currency. You have sovereign individuals who can create their own currency. Suddenly, we don't start thinking that we have to use this currency that is mandated by the government. Like, for a long time, the only legal tender that you could use, US dollar in America, and say, you know, you have to use this. They're forcing us into it whether you like it or not. And suddenly we have these options that government can't actually stop. And we started to see, you know, the tides turning when the internet came around, and when you started to have, like, digital, like, token cards. You had to get, like, you know, Starbucks card rewards and your Amazon points, and all of these became these different kind of almost competing currencies there that you could use in these specific ecosystems. And then we really saw that just blossom when Bitcoin was created, and then other people started experimenting with currency, and Bitcoin really has remained the stronghold there of this idea, this paradigm of uncensorable money that can't be shut down by government. And Libra, I mean, I don't actually think Libra is going to get off the ground. And I think that when they released it, finally they're realizing the benefit of decentralized money. Because if you read the Libra white paper, they talk about how, you know, we ultimately want to be decentralized. Sure, they do. I don't believe that either. But taking it at face value, they say they want to be decentralized. They're going to get there eventually. In 5 years, you know, they'll start moving down that track. But right now, they don't believe that the scaling is there and the technology is there to provide these services to the billions of users around the world that they have. I actually agree with that. I think that we haven't figured out scaling yet. We've got a long way to go with that. But there's a trade-off, right? Because the answer isn't necessarily having this centralized system that can be shut down, because then you're dealing with, you know, something that's hard to scale or something that never gets off the ground. And that's what they have right now. They have something that is centrally controlled, has an organization basically at the top of that saying, yeah, we're providing the resource for all of this. They can be shut down. Their servers can be unplugged. The CEOs can be thrown in jail. All of that can happen. And that can't happen with Bitcoin. You can't just unplug the Bitcoin server and be done with it. You can't throw the CEO in jail. And so it's a huge trade-off that we're finally starting to see the real value of. Well, like the mainstream is starting to see the real value of, because I don't think that Libra will get off the ground. If it does, it's going to be completely different to what their white paper has set forth. It's going to be this probably will just be like a government coin. But I don't think that they will ever approve a corporation to release something like this, which is why we do need to turn to decentralized monies, money that, you know, doesn't need approval, which just exists because the market, you know, decides that it has value, and it exists in, you know, potentially millions of computers all around the world. That's the society that I think we need to be building, this permissionless, decentralized society. And Bitcoin is like such a major tool in that. It makes me very excited.
What essentially one is a society where humans, us as the individual, we are in charge of our destiny, and that's at a financial level, that's at a governance level, not a government level. I don't think we actually need government. Right. Governance, yes, we can rule ourselves. We have the digital tools already to enable those kind of things. And it's interesting that the US might not let Libra happen, but there's other jurisdictions that are actually quite open to letting Libra happen. You know, Japan and Israel and a couple other places in Asia, for example. But that also doesn't surprise me, because they've seen competition in digital currencies already. They have Alipay and stuff like this that are very robust ways to move money around, that are, you know, still using digital fiat in that situation. But Libra, it's really kicked the hornet's nest in a way that I don't think they expected that they were going to.
And that's surprising that they didn't expect that, because everyone in crypto, we understand the value of decentralization, why it's so important. And we all look at Libra and we're like, well, they're going to get shut down. That's, you know, that's what's going to happen, because that's what's happened every time in history. We've had digital currencies before Bitcoin. What Bitcoin was a revolution in was creating a system that couldn't be shut down. It was decentralized. And before that, you had all these digital forms of gold and private monies that were created, and then the government just shut them down, or they shut themselves down because they saw that, you know, government could potentially do it, so they couldn't actually attract users and get a network effect for it to be useful. And so, yeah, it's a fascinating situation going on right now. One thing I would say, though, about different jurisdictions is that countries around the world have had a hard time standing up to the US government. So although we say that, you know, if the US government bans it, there are other places around the world, the US generally gets their own way. Not with wanting to purchase Greenland, obviously they were shut down there, but they, for the most part, you know, can exert a tremendous amount of pressure around the world and get a lot of things passed that countries may not want, but they eventually just succumb to US wishes. So I wouldn't bet on, I mean, one thing that I will say is that some countries will be fighting harder than others, and the US probably doesn't have the resources to monitor this tremendously well. So you may end up with countries saying, yeah, there's a ban, but how well is that enforced? I think that regardless of whether there are bans going to happen in cryptocurrency, there may well be. I think that what we've proven is that the tables have turned when it comes to power, and these things can't be shut down. And yes, you can write something on a piece of paper the same way that prohibition happened in America and didn't do anything. And it just, you just had people behind closed doors using stuff. I think if the government does crack down on this, then we're going to see these parallel economies emerging, and the black market's going to the free market is going to get much more robust. And you're going to have this government monitored market, and people are eventually just going to move away from that. And so that's my prediction of what's going to happen. The other alternative, if they don't crack down, is that they start to co-opt and they start to incorporate, things like Libra, which already kind of seems like government coin when you have MasterCard and Visa and PayPal and all these giant companies at the forefront.
What's the real difference, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that when you have these companies merging together, that's a tremendous leverage point for the government as well. So they'll probably co-opt those systems. And again, that's probably going to lead to people looking for alternatives. Do they want a system that is co-opted like that, or do they want something that is free? And it just comes down to education, letting people know about why freedom is important and why they should be opting to add more privacy to their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's actually a really interesting point that you made too about the US dollar I wanted to follow up on. And I think the US dollar is in a lot more trouble than a lot of people realize right now in terms of global domination and all that stuff. Because up until very recently, it didn't really have a lot of competition. But I think they pushed so hard for control that even their closest allies are in open rebellion against the dollar. You have the European Union; they're trading oil, or they were doing business with Iran using euros.
Yeah.
India and Iran are buying and selling oil using euros. We have Rosneft, which is Russia's third biggest oil company, no longer accepting dollars for oil. They're accepting euros. And this trend is continuing. We have Europe launching a SWIFT network competitor. We have China launching a SWIFT competitor. We have Russia trying to launch their own SWIFT competitor, but also kind of just saying, we'll probably use China's SWIFT alternative. We have Japan launching a SWIFT alternative. All of these countries have been targets, even though they might be allies, of dollar-based sanctions. You have the US telling Japan, you're not allowed to buy oil from Iran, right? This is the closest allies, and they're being treated with such disregard. People are de-dollarizing. Russia's dumped 85% of their U.S. Currency reserves, and they bought gold instead. We see China has been dumping U.S. bonds as well, and the Europeans are increasingly de-dollarizing. And as all these little pieces start to come together, the dominance of the dollar long term, it's going to be shaken up big time.
Oh, absolutely. I think that the US dollar is in trouble. I think that the US market, the economy is in trouble. I think the global economy is in trouble. You look at the emergence of negative interest rates all over the world. It is like this ice age that is creeping in. And people, if you think about holding bonds where you're losing money over time, people aren't going to choose to put their money in that. Yeah. If you think about holding money that is being systematically debased, it has become institutionalized in its debasement. As a policy, people aren't going to opt to hold that currency. They're going to opt to hold something that gives them more purchasing power, not less over time. So now that we have alternatives, specifically alternatives that can't be shut down, I think that governments are in real trouble. And we're just going to have to see what happens. It's not going to be this utopia. It's not going to be this time where, everyone moves over to this free money and the world was saved. No, it's going to be this situation where the government's going to fight back. They're going to fight against the users. They're going to fight against the on-ramps and the off-ramps. In the crypto space, you see bank accounts shut down at an alarming rate associated with cryptocurrency. You have Coinbase in England. They just lost their relationship with Barclays, and they're now banking with this startup. You have, all these all of these banks or banks that serve crypto customers that are being they're monitored and they're tracked. Their accounts are shut down. There's tremendous pushback against crypto being enabled. The only way they can control it is through the on-ramps and the off-ramps. But again, all that's going to push people towards is just not going back into fiat, not transferring their money, earning their money in crypto. This is the incentive that they're maybe not paying attention to right now, but the incentive structure that they're putting into place, where they're just encouraging people into this system that gives them more freedom. So, we'll have to see what happens there.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy when you look at this whole big picture that's going on. And of course, it kind of goes back to the start of our conversation about banks trying to force people in, banks and governments trying to force people into keeping all your money in the bank. But it's crazy
Yeah.
because keeping your money in the bank, you're losing money. You accounting for inflation and all this different stuff, and people are increasingly looking for alternatives. And it reminds me of this a quote, and I don't actually remember the quote, but the general idea of the
That was
quote,
a great
it was a
quote.
great quote written by somebody very intelligent, and I'm sure it's been really great. But anyway, the idea was that freedom's a constant battle. You know, it's you need to constantly work at freedom. Freedom's not just something that you just, oh, we got freedom, sit back and
Woo,
relax, you
rest on
know?
my laurels.
Yeah, that's it. Good thing about that freedom thing, because there's always going to be somebody looking to take your freedom away. Whether, and it's, you know, it's not always some kind of like Illuminati's taking over the world, ill intent kind of stuff. It's just creeping greed, creeping authoritarianism, creeping concerns of whatever it might be. It's a constant battle to ensure your own personal individual liberties in this world, and we as communities need to come together to help defend that. And you know, cryptocurrency is part of that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I could not agree more. And yeah, as we mentioned at the start of the show, just be aware of the choices that you're making. Are you enabling this system? Are you providing like perverse incentives for people to continue to misuse your data, etc.? You know, you should be thinking very carefully about the way you're living your life and starting to take back some of that control, because the control is just not going to be won back by some party who's fighting on your behalf. That's not the way it's going to work. You have to fight for your own freedom, and you have to be taking choices in your own lives. And there are lots of tools available to you right now. And, you know, just get educated about what's out there and ways that you can start taking back control.
Awesome. With that, we'll finish up the conversation. Naomi, thank you so much for coming back on the show and sharing your thoughts on, you know, freedom and crypto in the world with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It is always a pleasure.
And by the way, everyone, make sure there's a link down below. Check out Naomi on Twitter. Check her out on YouTube as well. Always sharing
Yep.
awesome, great information. So if you enjoy what was just said here, go find her over there.
And you got to come join me on my show again soon.
Will do.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you so much.